Hi, I'm Charles, and you're watching The State of the Republic.
Well, this week there was again a massive amount of news. The biggest piece of news this week, of course, was Hurricane Harvey, which managed to flood most of Houston and has resulted in over 40 deaths. Harvey set a new record for rainfall in the continental United States at 51.88 inches of rain. Harvey has also reportedly resulted in several major chemical leaks from the industrial complexes in and around Houston. It is suspected that companies may have discharged toxins during the storm on purpose to avoid costly processing and cleanup for the toxins. There are also reports that a chemical plant in Crosby, Texas, has already seen 2 chemical plant explosions thanks to lack of safety regulation and enforcement, and another 8 chemical tanks may explode as well. The company that owns the plant in question, Arkema, was able to successfully lobby the Trump administration to delay new safety rules for chemical plants. The company is further frustrating efforts to deal with the crisis by refusing to publicize the specific chemicals involved. Despite Trump's attacks on the country, Mexico has offered aid to the survivors of Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey is yet another example of the superstorms that are made increasingly common by climate change. The Republican Party's refusal to acknowledge these facts and act on them means that these superstorms will not only continue, but will most likely get worse in the future. Pumpkin Fuhrer previously repealed an Obama-era regulation requiring that infrastructure be built to withstand the impacts of climate change. His EPA director, Scott Pruitt, stated that science shouldn't dictate policy. Pruitt would much rather see policy based on the preferences of his fossil fuel donors. Trump also showed a remarkable lack of leadership on the hurricane response, flying into Texas and boasting about crowd size from atop a fire truck.
Thank you, everybody. What a crowd, what a turnout.
Trump further embarrassed himself by claiming that he saw the disaster firsthand, even though he was hundreds of miles away in Corpus Christi. Trump also tweeted about how impressive the storm was, and about Sheriff David Clarke's book. For those who may not remember, David Clarke is the sheriff who has been repeatedly accused of mistreating prisoners, including shackling a woman who was giving birth and denying water to a man until he died of dehydration. David Clarke has since resigned from office and is expected to take a job in the Trump administration. Trump also used his hurricane response to obtain free media showing his hat, which you can buy on his campaign website to help pay his son's legal bills and the Russia scandal. Texas Republicans are also coming under fire for previously voting against Hurricane Sandy relief, while they are currently now shouting from the rooftops for federal disaster aid for their own state. Texas's new anti-sanctuary city law was recently put on hold by a federal court. Turning now to the continuing fallout from Trump's pardon of Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the Arpaio pardon was condemned on a bipartisan basis, including by Arizona's 2 Republican senators, Jeff Flake and John McCain. Trump, meanwhile, justified it by pointing to commutations and pardons that Obama and Clinton made that were supposedly bad, showing a textbook case of whataboutism. Trump also justified dropping the pardon right as Hurricane Harvey was bearing down on Texas as a ratings decision. Arpaio is reportedly considering running for the Senate in 2018 against incumbent Republican Senator Jeff Flake. In light of this, Arpaio is attempting to distance himself from some of his previous comments.
How do you react to that? Well, they call you KKK. They did me. I think it's honor, right?
In executive branch news, the Trump administration has selected a former official from DeVry University to lead the education department unit in charge of preventing fraud. DeVry was a for-profit college that was repeatedly accused of defrauding students and was forced to make massive payments to settle allegations of wrongdoing from federal regulators. Trump also fired his longtime rally organizer, George Gigikos, because of low turnout and enthusiasm at his Phoenix rally last week. Trump this week also apparently thought that 2 female reporters sitting next to each other during a press conference were the same person. The Trump administration is continuing to roll back the progress of the Obama administration. Trump's Labor Department is delaying implementation of the fiduciary rule, which requires that your financial advisor actually give you advice that's good for you and not just good for their fees and commissions. Trump has also rescinded an Obama executive order prohibiting the transfer of certain military equipment, like armored vehicles or grenade launchers, to local police departments. There's no way that could possibly go wrong, now is there? The Trump administration this week also decided to eliminate a study on the gender pay gap, and Ivanka backed the effort despite publicly supporting wage equality previously. Ivanka has now lost the last thread that was holding up the myth that she was somehow moderating her father. For Eric Trump, his interesting statement this week could best be described as, "Kids say the darndest thing about their fathers." Eric Trump said, quote, "If they weren't talking about you, you wouldn't be doing something right, and it's important to keep it in context, otherwise, quite frankly, you end up killing yourself out of depression." That's him admitting that if Trump saw the negative press coverage about him, he'd probably kill himself. Secretary of Defense Mattis has signed deployment orders for more U.S. troops to be deployed in Afghanistan. Mattis is also refusing to implement Trump's transgender ban, at least for now, while a study on the subject is compiled by the RAND Corporation. Mattis also contradicted Trump on North Korea.
Thank you, members of the press, very much for coming.
Republicans said that you seek a diplomatic solution with North Korea. The president this morning tweeted that talking isn't the answer. Are we out of diplomatic solutions for North Korea?
No.
What additional diplomatic solutions could be taken? And then for Minister Song, what additional U.S. military support might South Korea need to be able to increase pressure on North Korea?
Now you're testing us here, you know. We bring you up here to take pictures. No, we're never out of diplomatic solutions. We continue to work together, and the minister and I share a responsibility to provide for the protection of our nations, our populations, and our interests, which is what we are here to discuss today.
Both Mattis and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson distanced themselves from the administration's response to the Charlottesville attack, with Tillerson in particular saying that, quote, "The president speaks for himself." The Government Accountability Office and the General Services Administration are now investigating the Trump Organization's lease on the old post office building in Washington, D.C., where Trump built his D.C. hotel. The terms of the lease explicitly prohibit public officials from benefiting from the lease. On Capitol Hill, Republicans are still staring down the debt ceiling, a possible government shutdown, Hurricane Harvey relief, renewing the National Flood Insurance Program, and a whole host of other program renewals and deadlines. Republican leaders are now reportedly considering throwing all of it together into one big stopgap spending bill in order to avoid failure. The Republicans' leadership to bundle together the essentials into one bill is already taking flack from the right flank of their caucus, especially the Koch brothers' Freedom to be Greedy caucus. Trump's proposed spending bill would cut disaster funding by nearly $1 billion, and the Coast Guard budget by $1.2 billion to pay for Trump's border wall. The Republicans are also nearly out of time to attempt to repeal Obamacare, with the Senate parliamentarian ruling that at the end of September that they will no longer be able to use reconciliation in order to pass an Obamacare repeal. The Republicans, however, are still pushing their efforts on so-called tax reform. Despite more public backing and campaigning by Trump on the issue that was not present for the Republican health care bill, congressional Republicans still do not have any more than a very broad outline on the program. The White House has not proved helpful so far, sending out a set of vague talking points that was light on any sort of specifics. Trump gave a speech in Missouri this week that was supposed to be on so-called tax reform, but it ended up just being an attack on Missouri Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. Trump's attacks on McCaskill have raised ethical issues, because if White House staff worked on the part of the speech that attacked McCaskill, it could constitute a violation of the Hatch Act, which prohibits most federal officials from engaging in politicking. It is also worth noting that while Trump lionized the Reagan tax cuts this week, he used to have very, very different opinions of them.
Today we're in a negative cycle in terms of the country. I mean, the whole country is really heading for big trouble. If interest rates don't come down, if money isn't loosened up, you see the savings and loan crisis. I mean, I've never heard this. But what caused the savings and loan crisis, other than incompetence and various other things, was the 1986 tax law change. It was a disaster. It took all of the incentives away from investors, et cetera, and it was a disaster. So you don't hear that. But that was really the primary, in my opinion, that was the primary problem with the savings and loan, and that's why the country is losing billions and hundreds of billions of dollars today because of a mistake in the tax law change.
The Trump administration has also announced significant cutbacks to programs designed to promote the ACA and help consumers navigate the individual marketplace in order to try to further undermine the Affordable Care Act. In better news, California Representative Duncan Hunter, who is himself facing a federal investigation for misuse of hundreds of thousands of dollars of campaign funds for personal use, recently said of Trump, "He's just like he is on TV. He's an asshole, but he's our asshole." Yes, he is. Democrats are going to hang this giant racist orange albatross around the Republicans' necks in the 2018 midterms. Speaking of elections, Republicans are reportedly considering reprising Karl Rove's 2004 strategy of placing conservative ballot initiatives in key states to boost Republican turnout. Republican leaders are worried that their party's incompetence and bungling will depress Republican voters into staying home in 2018. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon is currently attacking Trump, if somewhat indirectly. The Alabama Republican Senate primary for the special election to replace Jeff Sessions is currently advancing to a runoff between incumbent appointee Luther Strange and former Alabama Supreme Court Justice Roy Moore. Moore's extreme conservatism has led to worries that he will buck Senate Majority Turtle Mitch McConnell's leadership, and as a result, McConnell and his allies have poured in a massive amount of money to save Strange. McConnell was also able to wring an endorsement for Strange out of Trump. By contrast, Steve Bannon and some ultra-conservative groups have backed Moore's efforts. Trump and Bannon may now be having a proxy war in Alabama. As all of this swirls around the Trump administration, the Russia scandal continues to unfold. The Washington Post and New York Times have both reported this week on Trump's efforts to build a Trump Tower Moscow during the campaign. Trump signed a letter of intent for the proposed project and sent emissaries to Moscow that even attempted to contact Putin. The Kremlin has since confirmed that they were contacted by Trump representatives. Trump associate Felix Sater said about the project, quote, "Our boy can become president of the United States and we can engineer it," and, quote, "I will get all of Putin's team to buy in on this. I will manage this process." Ivanka also previously traveled to Moscow, and Sater said of that visit, quote, "I arranged for Ivanka to sit in Putin's private chair at his desk and office in the Kremlin." Video has also emerged of Trump discussing the prospect of such a project with the Russian media.
We've met with a number of people, and we may do something in Moscow and in various parts of Russia, but we have had some meetings while I'm here, and we could very well do something. We're thinking about doing a Trump Tower Moscow, so we're talking to a group of people about doing that.
In much worse news for both Trump and for the Republican Party as a whole, former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort was apparently taking notes during the meeting with Natalia Veselnitskaya about sanctions and possible Russian assistance to the Trump campaign, and those notes included the words Republican National Committee and donations next to each other. That potentially suggests that Russian-affiliated groups and persons may have been planning to funnel money into Republican campaigns and PACs. Special Counsel Mueller's investigation is also ensnaring even more people, with Paul Manafort's former attorney and current spokesperson Melissa Lorenza receiving subpoenas from Mueller's team. Mueller's grand jury also saw testimony from Rinat Akhmetshin, a former Soviet intelligence officer who also attended the now infamous Trump Tower meeting. Donald Trump Jr. is already set to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee in a closed hearing, and the Senate Intelligence Committee is expected to drag in Trump Jr., Manafort, and Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, who was one of the envoys sent to the Kremlin for the Trump Tower meetings. The House Intelligence Committee is reportedly considering dragging Trump himself in to testify. Republican Congressman Dana Rohrabacher is also now in increasingly hot water. The congressman, who is known as Putin's favorite congressman, recently met with Julian Assange of WikiLeaks and is now attempting to set up a meeting with Trump to convey the contents of that conversation. Rohrabacher also proposed pardoning Julian Assange in exchange for some sort of evidence that would supposedly prove that Russia did not hack the 2016 election. The Senate Intelligence Committee's investigators now want to talk with Rohrabacher about his meeting and are figuring out how to proceed given Rohrabacher's status as a member of Congress. Rohrabacher and Devin Nunes, the Republican House Intelligence Committee chair who threw off his committee's Russia investigation, are both from California. That fact is of particular note since the Trump administration ordered the closing of the Russian consulate in San Francisco. The building is currently in the process of being vacated, and passers-by saw that there was a large plume of smoke coming from the building. Consulate officials stated that they were burning documents in the fireplace. There is a significant possibility that Russian officials were indeed destroying evidence. As the scandal continues to grow, Mueller is enlisting more allies and bringing in more resources every day. Mueller has teamed up with New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. This cooperation would close off the ability of Trump to pardon his co-conspirators to make the investigation go away. Presidential pardons only apply to federal crimes, which means that in the event of a pardon, Schneiderman could still pursue state-level charges against Trump and his cohorts. Mueller has also enlisted the help of the IRS Criminal Investigations Unit to help with the investigation. The IRS Criminal Investigations Unit specializes in financial crimes, like tax evasion and money laundering, which is extremely useful in order to take a closer look at Trump's finances. It has also since emerged that Trump and Stephen Miller originally wrote a much longer and much more scathing letter for firing FBI Director James Comey. The letter was written weeks before the official firing of Comey. Trump was, of course, angry at Comey for the continuing investigation into the Russia scandal, and the letter reflected that. The letter amounted to essentially an open attempt to obstruct justice. The most important fact, though, is not that Trump attempted to obstruct justice. That was already known through Trump's public statements and actions. Copies of the original letter were given and read by Trump to senior officials, including Vice President Pence. Pence never mentioned the letter or its reasoning in public, helping the administration to cover up the original intent behind the firing of Director Comey. That constitutes possible obstruction of justice and misprision of a felony. The original letter was eventually stopped by White House counsel Don McGahn, who understandably was concerned about its contents. Instead, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein was given a copy and drafted his own letter, which was eventually used by Trump as the first public justification for the firing. Rosenstein's letter used the politicization and mishandling of the Clinton email case as justification, and it was quickly contradicted by Trump in a TV interview. Since then, the Justice Department has turned over a copy of the letter to Special Counsel Mueller, who has undoubtedly added it to the mountain of evidence emerging in the scandal. Now, finally, some less prominent but still interesting and important news. Conservative groups are currently preparing a massive anti-worker campaign to destroy public sector unions. The plan is designed to permanently hobble progressive politics by destroying one of its most important sources of electoral and financial support. It was also revealed this week that Wells Fargo created far more fake accounts to bill customers than originally thought. Republicans are nevertheless still trying to gut Dodd-Frank and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to allow Wall Streeters to steal more of our hard-earned money. Sarah Palin had her defamation lawsuit against the New York Times thrown out by a federal judge, who emphasized the importance of political journalism in their opinion. Sarah will now presumably blame Obama for that, just like she blamed Obama for her son's domestic violence. Also, there have been more arrests of neo-Nazis and white supremacists who committed violence during the Charlottesville attack. While police's initial response was shamefully lackluster, they have since been pushed into arresting these criminals and terrorists. Also, a man who alleged that someone stabbed him on the suspicion that he was a neo-Nazi has himself been arrested and charged after a police investigation concluded that he has stabbed himself and made up the entire story. He has since been charged with filing a false police report and could face up to 1 year in prison and a fine of up to $2,620. Conservatives had latched onto this story and spread it as evidence of supposed left-wing violence, but we now know that they were literally spreading fake news.
Thank you for watching the program. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting content.